Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, the big Charleston contest.
I am Stefano. I am an Italian man.
You've reached the house of unrecognized talent.
We argued over her obsession with a band. The Devil's Architects weren't famous or successful or anything, but she thought they were wonderful.
We start with the Devil's Architects. The bassist is sacked and they become Broken Crypt. They play 2 gigs and it's all over because the drummer walks out.
Domo arigato, Mr. Scotto.
And welcome back to the Brooklyn's Dad Talks About Everything podcast. Today on the podcast with your host, Michael Scotto, we're going to be talking about what you've been waiting for, band life. Yes, that's right. We're going to take a little diversion here to kind of just get our heads straight and just kind of rattle on about stuff. I'm going to talk about what it's like to be in a band, what it's like to play music, what it's like to write music, what it's like to be around real musicians. Not me, but other real musicians. And we're just going to enjoy that. This will be part 1 of a 2-part series on this. So I hope you can enjoy it. And then maybe you'll check us out on Spotify.
All right, guys, you have one wish left.
Come on, guys. Well, if you were a band.
So let's improve ourselves.
Really
we got to do more than that. We want to be big. We want to be real big.
Yeah. Be the new Beatles.
We're talking about chicks, money. We're talking about fame.
Big endorsements.
There it is. All right. We made our decision. We want to be a highly successful, rich, famous, awesome rock and roll band.
You got it.
This is 90s action right here. That is 90s action.
This is 90s action.
Yes.
That is 90s action.
And so is that, man. That's a great stick, Scott.
Thank you.
Great stick.
If left is to right as right is to wrong, then who's to say that love is strong? I lie to you and then to myself. Inconsistency lingers within. A thought possessed, its smile compressed, as the smile turns into sin. Wrong is to right as day is to night, as notes fall within a song. A cry made in vain is heard through the rain, as a voice grows tired with pain. The pain grows from within and multiplies sin, and silence is heard through the wind. Mistakes of the past linger but last until darkness collects life's rent. We all have a side we choose to hide that grows and begins to spawn. Those are the words to the song Rapture by Brandon Edwards from the band Nothing But Sky. That's not all the lyrics. Those are just selected lyrics that I chose. Brandon was quite the wordsmith. He worked a long time on his lyrics, his guitar parts as well. But anyway, I like to start off with lyrics, and I figured I'd start off with his this time instead of something from me. As noted in our opening, in our introduction, I just wanted to kind of get away from some heavy stuff and talk about life in a local band. One of the things that I watch a lot of documentaries on bands and singers and stuff from over the years, and one of the things that comes through is that they often say, if you're really going to make it in that business, it's got to be your whole life. It's got to be your whole life. And one thing Craig and I, the other guitarist in the band, would say is we had 1 foot in the world, real world, not worldliness, but 1 foot in the real world and 1 foot in the band world. We kind of did that because we kind of had a reality check in that we knew that the chances of becoming the next Beatles, although it's always part of your thinking, everybody thinks like that when you join a band. We also knew that the chances of that, the other side of our brain, the left side of our brain, was saying that's a slim chance. And we saw people around us who were very, very talented people. Greensboro in the 80s and 90s really had a tremendous independent band scene, local band scene. Ben Folds came out of that. Athenaeum came out of that. They were very successful from our point of view here in Greensboro. And, Evan Olson and Snooze, Britt Uzzle, and a number of others that had some regional success and even national success in the case of several that I mentioned. And obviously, most people know who Ben Folds is. So anyway, we came out of that and we had this concept that we were going to kind of keep 1 foot in reality. We graduated from college. Not that those other guys didn't, but we didn't really spend 24/7 perfecting our craft. Although I think when you come out on the other side of it and we look back at what we did create, I think there's some really good stuff there. We didn't have the time, we didn't have the money to have producers and to go into studios all the time. And again, in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, people could go into the studio, but that took money and we didn't do that. So we were into the home recording thing, which a lot of people were doing as well. And we were sort of buying the equipment and learning as we went. So we had various You can hear the results of all this on Spotify. If you look for Nothing But Sky on Spotify, that you could tell when we went into a studio. But even when we went to the studio, and we went to the same studio that a lot of successful, far more successful, local bands, Squirrel Nut Zippers. It was in Raleigh at Duck Key Studios, and then we went there again second time when he moved to Mebane and a home studio. And even then, when we had worked on the songs and we had some help on some of the production end of it, and we thought through some of the songs, still, you're in there paying, at the time, I guess it was $80 an hour, and we were a bunch of guys. And so you didn't want to be there all day. So you're like, let's go for 3 hours, knock out what we can, have Jerry Key mix it for us and master it, and we'll get our results. And again, he was doing, it was still analog. It was really good equipment, but it was still reel-to-reel analog, which is fine with me. I think you get a full, rich sound out of that. So I really liked the results of a lot of what we did, but a lot of else what we did was just home recording on a 4-track recorder and then us trying to mix it ourselves kind of thing with various results. And again, you can hear that at Spotify on Nothing But Sky. But the reason I wanted to talk about this today is getting back to my point about being in a local band and what it was like. Now, our opening clip here, the 4th clip, was from the show Whitechapel that I happen to be watching right now. It's a British mystery program from about 2010. I don't know, I forget how many seasons it is, 4 or 5 seasons. And anyway, one of the things was about a girl who goes off to follow this local band. It's actually part of the plot. If you don't watch Whitechapel, if you watch Whitechapel, you might want to turn off for 30 seconds here or skip ahead. It's a diversionary thing. They think that she's one of the victims. They think that the band has something to do with it. Turns out they don't. But when they go to her mother, because she's been missing, the mother says, she was big fans of this band, Devil's Architect. They weren't famous or anything. They didn't get anywhere. Well, that's what a lot of bands are. You play because you think you want to become famous to some degree. And then again, in my mind, and Craig and I talked about this a lot, we wanted to kind of be regionally known. Like when I would go to the record store, when I went to the guitar store here locally, where Craig and Brandon actually work at the Music Loft and its sister store over at More Music. I mean, we met all the local luminaries and we knew them, and I knew all the guys that worked there. And, I had a Rickenbacker bass, and Rob that worked there, he worked on basses, but he was really good on Rickenbackers. And that's where we ran into a lot of people. And we actually, one time we needed a practice area, and they let us practice in there, which was kind of cool. You hang around all that, and so part of you is like, I just want to kind of be locally known, as part of this particular band. And then also part of you thinks, well, maybe somebody will pick us up and we'll get some national attention. Although, again, we always had one foot in the world. But the reality is it's an extremely difficult world to get into. And, I do think Brandon is very talented as a guitarist. Scott, I think, is a phenomenal drummer. Craig, I think, underestimates himself as a guitarist. He's a different kind of guitarist than Brandon, and they work perfectly together. And if you listen to our stuff, you can really hear the difference in style. And I think it really works well. And in the midst of all that, I had to add whatever I could on bass. And I think I tried to make the bass lines, at least as time went on, a little more, add a little more to the song. They wouldn't just be playing along with the rhythm. They would add a little, da 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 that kind of thing that I would do, da 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 da, da 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 da. I mean, kind of thing. I'm very limited in my skills, if you even want to call them skills. But playing music it's an interesting thing. It actually, from studies have shown, it expands the brain. Writing lyrics helps expand your thought process and your vocabulary to some degree. And writing lyrics is extremely difficult. It's amazing to me that Paul McCartney, who again is the greatest of all time in everything, he plays every instrument under the sun. The guy keeps coming up with melodies like nobody's business. And he's actually a really good producer as well. But as a lyricist, I mean, not everything Paul wrote is brilliant, but the volume, how could it be? I mean, the guy put out 175,000 albums between the Beatles, Wings, and his solo stuff, and writing for other people. So when you listen to lyrics sometimes, it's really hard to write good lyrics. I think Brandon really had some excellent lyrics. Now, again, when you do that, when you write on that level, Brandon was more ethereal. My lyrics, if you're familiar with them, are very more straightforward. I tried to be clever on some stuff. I had a song called Now She's Dead, which I had, I tried to write with a little more allegory involved. I tried to do that on several occasions. On the Brink is a song that I have that I like the lyrics on. But it's tough. I'm telling you, writing good lyrics is really a tough game. I think Brandon did a good job with it. Craig has always said that he doesn't like to write lyrics, but when you look back at some of the lyrics he did write, I think they're really good. We didn't have the volume that Brandon had while we were in the band. Now I've got, a million billion songs in demo form that I've written, whatever I had around me, a keyboard or a guitar, and I'm not much of a keyboardist or a guitarist, but what I had and a few things I wrote with the bass, which is hard to write just with the bass. I kind of plow through that, and there's some good lyrics in there, and I think there's some there's some rough worked melodies in there on some of that stuff and some ideas, but you really need people around you to flesh it out, people who know what they're doing. But anyway, that opening clip from us, you hear us talking about becoming rich and famous and all that, that was from a film that was made for a class, a broadcasting or video class at UNC Greensboro. A friend of mine was in that class, Greg, and he and the other guy were putting together this course. Now, they came and filmed for a while that day, and I always said, please don't destroy that video. There was some really good stuff on there, some comedy material. But anyway, they didn't. And what we have there is a copy of 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 a VHS that sat in storage for years. And when I finally dug it out and tried to pull the audio off it, it's really bad. And even then I tried to clean it up, but I did the best I could. But anyway, what you get a sense in there is that's me circa 1990, I think, may have been 91, but I think it was 1990. And, chicks, money. And then our famous thing was, what do you want? What are you really looking for? Well, we were looking for big endorsements. We want to endorse Coca-Cola or whatever. That's where the money is, And it's a funny mindset. Again, we were playing it up for the camera and everything. We were actually in 3 different videos in that class. It was funny because they had to find music that was not copyrighted that they could use. So it was actually rather interesting because one was a song of Brandon's called Confusion, which is one of his early tracks. And they took our track and they just took him out and videotaped him and then just stuff around Greensboro for his song. 4 Guys, 3 Wishes is what I called it. And that's what it's been called ever since. Because, we find this thing and we get 3 wishes and you come in at the 3rd wish there on that clip. But anyway, 4 Guys, 3 Wishes is what we called it. And then the song Pieces, that was one of Brandon's, which has a really good guitar solo in it. It picks up in the second half. Again, Brandon was, particularly at that time, far more advanced in production than we were. We always look back and say, we wish we would have worked more time on the songs. We just step back and say, what can we do here? What can we do there? Which is what we did when we finally went in the studio. Like Blue Eyed Happy Girl, which is probably our most heard track. Craig and I wrote that together. And if you hear the original demo of it and then you hear the final studio version, there's obviously an advancement there because we did bring in Evan Olson, and he was very kind enough to come in and help us produce that song. And then we went into the studio. He was there to help produce it and mix it, etc. And again, the interesting thing about that track, and it's the first track on our Spotify, remember Spotify, Nothing But Sky, is that he went and said, can I do a solo on it? And we're going to say no to Evan Olson. We're not idiots. And Craig had a solo worked out and everything, but sure, take a shot. One take, he nailed that thing. And it's, again, to this day, it's just, every time I hear that, it's great. And then when we did play it live, Craig emulated it. Anyway, we're very proud of that track. It's a very simple track. And the interesting thing about it is Blue Eyed Happy Girl was inspired at the time. It was written around, I think, May of 1991. And around that time is when I got engaged to my fiance at the time. And I was not a believer. And that's when she left me very badly. We talked about that in a previous podcast, that whole experience. I went through that terrible experience. But anyway, we carried through with that track because Craig added his part to it. Craig wrote a bridge to it as well. The musical part of it was primarily Craig. The melody on the chorus, the melody really came from me, except on the anyway, I'm now getting into minutiae. That's what I talk about music. I'm talking about all these details nobody cares about. Just go listen to the track. Anyway, being in a band, it's really interesting because over the years now, I still have my bass. I still like to play along with stuff. I'm still very interested in music, and I'm very interested in how musicians think. I just watched a documentary on John Waite. I ain't missing you at all, missing you. If you don't know who John Waite is, he was in the Babies, actually with Jonathan Cain, and then when the Babies kind of fell apart, Jonathan Cain went and became Journey's keyboard player and one of the main songwriters that we all know to this day. So anyway, and then of course they had the band Bad English, which was Jonathan Cain as well, with John Waite and Neil Schon from Journey, when Journey was in sort of a hiatus between albums. They put out some hits that you're familiar with as well. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting because John Waite's been in the business for many, many years. And he talked about the integrity he had. He said one thing he looks back on, he made decisions and got ripped off by record companies, but he said he always thought he did things with integrity. And you know, if you can do that, because a lot of people don't get in the music business, they're able to do that. Anyway, I'm rambling on here, but being a musician, I always put that in air quotes because I'm nobody. I mean, I've been in praise bands, and after I became a Christian, wrote some Christian music, and again, some of that made its way into the Nothing But Sky repertoire because I had some of those songs and I changed the lyrics after I became a believer. And then a lot of what I wrote after that was, at home recording and that kind of thing was from the perspective of a believer. And then when I was in Alabama, I joined the praise band. I was the token old guy in the praise band with a bunch of high schoolers and college students. And you always have to have one old guy, particularly on bass. That's what makes it really exciting. But that was a lot of fun because I really only had to play bass. And so I got to really, do what I wanted to do. And we played a lot and practiced a lot, which was really fun. So I got to really explore on the bass a little bit, which again, Michael Scotto exploring on the bass is nothing, honestly. I'm very limited. I can make a jump and howl, but I don't have I don't have extensive skills. I'm not going to be running up and down the neck anytime soon, but I do enjoy playing. So, but again, if you haven't been in a local band, if you know anybody in a local band, it's an interesting thing when you meet other band guys. And I remember playing a festival in Centerville, Alabama. We went up there, and I always try to go talk to other band guys. And even in the Christian world, there's always these guys who are just too good for the room. I mean, they're too cool for the room. And they try to impress you with things. And the funny thing about being in Centerville, Alabama with these people is they had some really nice looking instruments, but it was really cheap stuff. I mean, I'd go up and I'd say, oh, that's really nice. And I go looking up to them and go, oh, it's a knockoff. But if you're a musician, you know the good brands, you know the knockoff brands. And even among the good brands, you know sort of their better stuff as opposed to their cheaper stuff, the different years. I'm not an expert on all that. I know the big picture. I mean, Craig knows all that stuff. Brandon's probably very familiar with it. And again, while I mention Brandon and Craig, I want to stop again and talk about Scott's drumming. If you listen to our stuff, Scott's a really good drummer. He was a really powerful drummer, and he had a really good feel for the songs. And I always like that. That's my favorite thing about any drummer, if you have a feel for the songs. Like Neil Peart from Rush he's a phenomenal drummer, no doubt about that. But I prefer a Ringo or Keith Moon to a Neil Peart. As much as I love Neil Peart, I love him. Again, I'm not taking away, but he's a great drummer for Rush. But Keith Moon and Ringo, really, particularly Ringo, more than anybody, and John Waite says that. He says he's so much better than anybody else once you understand. He says he's like a singer who's a percussionist, which is a really interesting way to put it. And that's really because Ringo, I always said he drums the song better than anybody. If you listen to the Beatles, it's not like the same drum through all thing. Each song has its own unique drum. Anyway, now I'm getting into the Beatles. But anyway, Scott had a good feel for that. He drummed the song too, and I always admire that in a drummer. But anyway, we're coming up to the 20. I might go a little bit past 20 minutes today because I'm just thinking about music, and I miss playing. I miss playing live. Not that I ever played for huge audiences. I mean, in the praise band is when I played for most of the bigger audiences. We would go to these little churches, little rural churches in Alabama, and they would bring in all these kids, and then we would stay afterward to sign autographs, which I always thought was weird. But I had perfected my autograph at that point because I'd been practicing it since I joined the band. You got to have this cool autograph, So I finally got to use it with all these little 12-year-olds. Now, they weren't as interested in me because I was some 40-year-old something scary-looking old guy. They liked the young guys, Scott and David. They're all the cute guys, so they like to talk to them, all little 12, 13-year-old girls. They'd come over to me, and a couple of, guys would come and try to talk to me about bass playing, cool 13-year-old kid talking to me about bass playing. And, that was fun too. I didn't mind doing that. And again, I'm not really an aficionado on all that stuff. I mean, I know the basics of it because I've been around it. I mean, more than your average person, I can talk more intelligently about it, but I'm not an expert on all the intricacies. Like right now I have my kids got together and got me a Fender jazz bass, which I really love. It's a really nice, obviously, the jazz bass. And Craig helped them purchase it and everything. But, all the particulars about this particular model of Fender Jazz. I mean, Craig knows what he's doing, so I trust it. But I know, Fender Jazz bass is a Fender Jazz bass. It's still a Fender. Anyway, for my purposes, which is just playing around here or adding some bass to some tracks I have, it's really great, and I really enjoy it, and it's nice to play. But I've had a Rickenbacker, I've had an Ibanez, had a Roscoe, had a Jasmine bass over the years. I've had lots of different basses for different reasons. And I'm a pick player because I tried playing with my fingers when I first started and I got bloody fingers. And then finally, Kevin at the Music Loft gave me this heavy bass pick, and he was a bass player. And I've been a pick player ever since, for the most part. Occasionally I finger, but I prefer playing on the pick. And it suits my style, and you can hear it in the tracks. Anyway, we're past 20 minutes now, and I've just been wandering on talking about music. But it's a really interesting topic, and to me, and being in a local band, and going back listening to that Four Guys, Three Wishes. Again, we were acting. We know we were hamming it up for the camera, but part of you does think about chicks money, which is me. That's me saying that, chicks money. We want everything, chicks money, and then big endorsements, which is kind of what you think even in the back of your mind, even if you're in it for the art, even if you're in it for the songwriting, even if you're in it for the performing. There's part of you that thinks about all the other things that seem to come along with rock and roll. And that changed completely when I became a believer, obviously. The songs changed, my whole entire outlook on it changed, and what I wanted to communicate with music changed. I mean, just in mentally thinking, when I'm writing Blue-Eyed Happy Girl, or if I'm writing the songs I wrote at the time, I'm trying to be John Lennon, I'm trying to be Paul McCartney, I'm trying to write these pop songs that are listenable, I'm trying to write lyrics that people can remember. And then when I became a believer, all I wanted to do is to relate a message, even if the message wasn't as direct. I wanted something deeper to come across. I wanted something from a deeper part of me to come across. Blue-Eyed Happy Girl is trying to write a clever lyric around a melody. At the time, my girlfriend, what's the song Believe? Believe, I ended up recording that in the studio in Raleigh with Craig, etc. And those are the lyrics. The original song was Waiting for the Wind. And the lyrics changed in that, and the sort of the focus changed of it, even though it was similar. But my perspective had changed on it. Same thing with Don't Worry Anymore. Don't Worry Anymore was The King Is Knocking. And it had a similar idea. The King Is Knocking at Your Door was still this generic God concept. But the original lyrics had to do with Thurgood Marshall retiring. It was an anti-abortion song hidden all through the lyrics. The one that they told us of is gone, a part of history long gone. Children sleep in the night. There's still many battles left to fight. That was an anti-abortion thing. And I changed that, when I became a believer. And then some of my early songs, my acoustic stuff that I wrote as a believer, I go back and listen to now going, wow, I wish I had that depth of feeling and love I had for the Lord when you first become a believer. You kind of want to rekindle that. Now you grow in the faith, and I know the Bible a lot better, and I can speak more intelligently to a lot of those things. But just those first feelings you have, and I can hear that in the music, and it's captured when I recorded those songs, just me and an acoustic guitar, or me and a keyboard, a couple years later. And, some of my tracks that I recorded at home, you can hear my kids in the background, which is kind of fun. I strung, I had several songs I kind of just strung together just to kind of do that. It was kind of my Abbey Road thing just for me. And then at the end of it, my two daughters come running in to talk to me, and I kept it on the tape. My dog is not on any of them. He's on this, but he's not on any of the recordings. Anyway, we're going to stop there. We're getting up to 25 minutes, but I just want to kind of just talk about this stuff, just to change pace and to, we're at 40 episodes for season 2, and I don't know if I'm going to take a break now and, start season 3 and maybe do a little bit of different change, kind of come at things from a different angle. Anyway, you have a great day. That's Rigby barking in the background. And, again, Nothing But Sky. Go to Spotify, Nothing But Sky. The words Nothing But Sky. Again, we have 25 tracks there. I'm about to add, I think, about 5 more tracks that I've been cleaning up. I'm getting a little better with the software and cleaning up old cassette stuff from the early 90s, which is a copy of a copy of a copy. But I'm getting a little better at it. So I'm hoping to put up a few more tracks in maybe the month, maybe this summer. So anyway, hang on to that. Subscribe to Nothing But Sky or follow-ups and that kind of thing. This podcast and my blog and my book, which is Devin Dibley and His Golden Key. If you want to find that, it's a novel. It's an allegory. I tried to be C.S. Lewis, which I'm not. Tried to be Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and I'm not. Tried to be C.S. Lewis, and I'm not. But I did my best. That's where the inspiration comes from. And then, anyway, we'll just leave it there. So you have a great day and listen to some good music and appreciate. Writing music is really hard. Lyrics, that kind of thing. That's why they have some of these stars today. If you look at there's 8 different songwriters on some of these tracks, and they're forgettable. A lot of the stuff today is forgettable. It's just made to sell in the short term, and even the lyrics are forgettable. But they still have to have 8 different songwriters on them, And, they have professional songwriters doing this, was putting out this pablum to sell records. But to really write meaningful long-term, like Denison Whitmer, write that down. He's an independent artist. He's on Asthmatic Kitty Records. You can find him everywhere too. One of my favorite lyricists. Absolutely wonderful lyricist and a great singer. And I like his production. It's based around acoustic guitar, but it's really, really good stuff. Again, Denison Whitmer. So anyway, enough plugs, and we shall move on and have a nice day. Bye-bye.